Welcome to Mac and Bleu, the cutting-edge podcast for the nation's builders, merging the realms of construction with exciting advancements in technology. Join us on a thrilling journey where we delve into the dynamic world of blockchain, AI, the metaverse, virtual and augmented reality, and their transformative impact on the industry. Our engaging discussions span a wide spectrum, covering not only construction, economic development, supply chain, and market segments, but also exploring the vibrant tapestry of diversity within the construction landscape. We shed light on the intersection of local politics and its profound influence on the construction sector, while championing the remarkable contributions of women and minorities in construction. For all things Mac and Bleu, head to www.macandblue.com, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. I'm your host, JJ Levinsky. Now let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mac and Blue. I'm your host, JJ Levinsky, president and co-founder of Blue Wave. Don't everyone ostracize me, but we've got another guest from Next Level Growth here, Chad Nikkel this time. And again, we did this as a little bit of a double up. By the time you see this, whether he goes first or whether Chris Prenovo goes first, it's indifferent. We were just getting a lot of asks outside of our circle to do more of this business coaching, talking about everything from growth to takeouts to private equity to ESOPs to all those kind of things. We've kind of had a focus on that lately because of the nature of the economy. So if there's a lot of things that are repeated here, don't worry about it, because the more we get in front of you and the more we connect with the audience, we figure there's a lot of knowledge here. So Chad is lucky enough to join us as well. So thank you, Chad.
Great to be here.
I'll let him give a little bit of his own bio like we always do. But I'm going to actually read a little bit just to, again, put it in the framework of what Chad's experiences are. So Chad Nikkel is a growth expert and leadership coach who helps entrepreneurs and team leaders grow better companies and create work-life balance at the same time. He is a business guide at Next Level Growth, a company that offers coaching, consulting, and training services to individuals and organizations who want to achieve exponential growth without burning out, classically stated. Chad has over 25 years of entrepreneurial experience in the home service space, including the pool industry. He's also a founding partner of National Pool Partners, a new pool service company that leads partners with leading regional pool service owner-operators to provide them with capital and expertise. I'm sure we're going to spend some time talking about that. And Chad attended engineering at Kansas State, so he's a Wildcat, not one of those Jayhawks.
Go Wildcats.
Yeah. And blah, blah, blah. I could read on. Anyway, point is, welcome, Chad, and glad to have you here today.
Thank you, JJ. A lot of PR there, it sounded like to me.
Yeah. But we got to do it. We got to make Michael happy, right?
There you go.
All right. So before we dive into the nuts and bolts of what you're doing now, take us back to, like even with Chris, we talked about, we usually end up sitting in these chairs by trial and error, and our battle scars are as good as our success stories, right?
Yeah.
So if you would go back, how does an engineering guy, take 10, 15 minutes and go, how do we go from there to now where you were coaching?
Yeah. Well, it probably takes a lot more than 15
All right. Well,
minutes, but
if it takes more, it takes more.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, engineering wasn't really, that wasn't long for the world. Let's put it that way.
Your guidance counselor screwed up?
Yeah, really. Yeah. And that was kind of a diversion, let's call it, because I grew up on the farm in Kansas and, was exposed to a lot of hard work, kind of do what you say you're going to do kind of stuff.
Were you a big family?
Actually, no, just me and my brother.
Okay.
And
so for a farm family, that's kind of small.
It's fairly small, right?
Yeah.
Work is hard, right? So
damn parents.
I know, right? They're getting their money's worth. But the reality of that was hard work, do what you say you're going to do, shake somebody's hand, look them in the eye, you figure it out, you do it.
Yeah.
That's kind of what's in my ethos, and still to this day, for sure is. So it came from that. But construction, I spent a lot of my life in construction. I actually started my first company before the Kansas State stint.
Oh, really?
So that was in the roofing business.
Oh.
So yeah, spent some
So you're
time.
still here to tell us about it. So
yeah,
you didn't fall off too many roads.
Yeah. Well, I have a right knee that is telling me that at some point it's going to need to be replaced. So I'm sure that's from those days. But yeah. But no, speaking of battle scars, that first business, I lost in bankruptcy. So I probably have some scars there. I lost a lawsuit that, I call it my Harvard education. It's about the cost of a Harvard education. And, I don't make those mistakes these days. Those hard lessons.
How old were you at the time?
I was young in my
20?
Yeah, my early 20s. 21 actually when I filed bankruptcy. Yeah.
Then like getting kicked right in the huevos at a young age, right?
Yeah. Married young. business young, and I actually had a frozen bank account for a minute in that whole situation. So it was painful. It was painful, but it's shocking that I still can, talk about this.
So how do you battle through something like that?
I think, because I have people come to me and say, I can't make it on $20 an hour, and I said, look, sit down, let's talk about it, because I can tell you can. You just have to figure out what's really important, and the things that aren't important have to go by the wayside, and you have to focus on the things that are important. And it works that way in business too, right? So a business that is struggling, there's typically something that they're not focusing on. They're spending a lot of time on the spreadsheets when they should be spending more time on sales or in front of potential customers and those kinds of things.
All right, so we got off on a tangent a little bit. So back to let's say K-State days. So keep going.
Yeah. So that business, I think it was at a time in my life when I kind of felt that entrepreneurial bug, if you will, and was focused on building that business. When all my friends were out partying and, having a good time, I was writing estimates and, trying to figure out where the next project was going to come from and how, how we were going to pay for the truck we needed to buy next and all those things. But building that kind of up into something that kind of worked and ran efficiently. And then that company, when we lost it in bankruptcy, or when I lost it in bankruptcy, had, really probably put some core principles in place that I used a lot later in life, but we just had made some mistakes that unfortunately caught up with us in that bankruptcy.
Yeah, but at 20, 21 years old, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Exactly right. And I have a 24-year-old son now, and I've tried to portray certain things to him, but he still has to figure some of those things out on your own. You can't just say, do it this way. Right. And the same thing happens with coaching, right? Like, I can probably see certain things, but I'm not going to be able to make the decisions for you. Right. So some things in business you have to just experience for yourself.
So sorry, I cut you off again. Post K-State, you jump right in the pool thing, or what happened there?
No, after that stint, essentially, the only time I've really punched a time clock in my life, I went to work for Learjet. So I said, hey, I got to go get a job, right? I need to get out of this bankruptcy situation. I have to go get a job. And I had got my pilot's license. So I love airplanes. Oh. And so I went to Wichita and there was an open call for jobs at Learjet. And so I went there and got hired. And the guy at Learjet said, the job's in Tucson, Arizona. And I said, well, that sounds interesting. I think I'd like that, but I should probably go home and talk to the wife. And my wife was 4 months pregnant at the time. And I, went back and said, hey, I got a job. So good news. We're going to be able to, buy groceries. The next thing is it's in Arizona. How do you feel about that? And she was like, all right, fine, let's do it. So we moved to Tucson and, knew nobody, and worked my ass off and got back on my feet and took it from there.
So looking back, I mean, I'm going forward to go back, Chad, and we'll get to everything that you're doing now in the coaching aspect. What were the takeaways of what you learned during the time at Lear?
So time at Lear, I think it was really a recovery time for me. So I was only there 2.5, 3 years. Essentially, it was the start of the corporate kind of crisis where everything was being scrutinized. People, the spending money on business jets suddenly wasn't a good idea. It was prior to 2011. So I think what I learned from that was the experience of just dig in and get it done, right? Don't, for me personally, it was trying to get my finances back in order. We were having our child and all those things, but really commitment, don't be afraid to work the hours. If there's overtime available, I took it, right? Because, put the time in, put the effort in. But really,
did your wife have an understanding at the time?
Yeah.
And so it was a true marriage in your work.
Yeah.
And I mean that in a positive way, not in a negative way.
Yep. Yeah. 100%. I think, as anything in life, if there's an opportunity and it takes a little bit of extra effort and that's going to get us through to the other side of it, you have to take that opportunity, right? So that
extra effort.
Yeah. Extra effort. And these days I talk about, return on life and work-life balance and all of those things, right? Because sometimes people work too much in one direction when they should be, considering the options on the other way. But during that time in my life, that was an opportunity to put food on the table, and I took it. So when things started going south in the business aircraft kind of world, and 2011 happened, I lost that job. I got laid off, right? And so I was like, well, I guess it's time to go back to being an entrepreneur and go back into the construction world. So I went back into roofing business and essentially got an opportunity in Ohio and went from Arizona to Ohio.
Oh, so you moved back to the Midwest?
Moved back to the Midwest. Yeah.
Well, I mean, more, yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah. More Ohio. Okay, keep going.
Yeah. So I spent a little bit of time helping a couple of guys and myself. We got a business going in the roofing space there. Grew that business really rapidly. We went from zero roughly to $17 million in revenue in about 18 months.
Ooh.
So we had
It's a heavy ramp up.
Yeah, heavy ramp up. A lot of wobbles there. So I learned a lot about creating good teams of people, specifically around sales, because I spent a lot of time like getting the sales structure in place.
Were you capitalized at the time?
Meaning
that did one of the partners have some money?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The other partners, I was essentially VP of ops for them at the time. So they were the money behind it essentially. And, we got in and there was a hailstorm essentially in Ohio. And so it was like, we were doing a lot of exterior work. And that turned into other opportunities. So from there it went to, we launched 3 locations. We launched Chicago and St. Louis and Columbus, Ohio. But those opportunities, from a running the business perspective, I learned a lot about creating good cohesive teams, putting people in place and kind of like, trust but verify, I guess, if you will. We produced a lot of roofs.
There comes a time when dreams become a reality, when you see your vision materialize into a true work of art. And the only way to get there is to choose a general contractor who shares that same vision and knows how to bring it to life. At Bleu Wave, we aren't so big that we've forgotten where we've come from, and we aren't so small that we can't care for your projects regardless of their size. When your vision deserves safety, perfection, timeliness, and expertise in order to become a reality, trust Bleu Wave to get it done right the first time.
In 18 months, $17 million in revenue, built revenue was a pretty good, significant feat, I think.
Was that commercial or residential or both?
It was both, but largely residential, yeah.
Now, when you were talking about those things you learned, was it just you and these other people? Was it organic, or did you actually have a present-day Chad involved?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of that was organic. And, I probably have some things in my DNA for whatever reason that allows me to figure some of that stuff out. But that brief stint I had in college, and I do not have an engineering degree. I spent time in engineering school, but I don't hold a degree, essentially. So I would say my experiences come from a lot of hard knocks in the field. So let's call it the blood, sweat, and tears university.
So on that second stint in the roofing industry, and you'll see a pattern here I'm going to keep asking is, what were the takeaways during that tenure?
Yeah, I mean, I think the takeaway largely was organization and project management is how we actually get shit done, right? So you can sell lots of things, but you got to be able to produce them, right? So being organized and methodical from a construction perspective. I'm speaking from a construction perspective.
You can be, and we don't have to focus just on the construction.
Yeah,
so.
It just happens that there's a lot of that in my life.
Yeah, well, and me too.
Yeah, exactly. But good, clean project management allowed us to produce a lot of things in a timely fashion because, selling that much revenue and completing it in an efficient manner, you can't do that just out of a piece of paper,
right?
So I think I learned a lot of those things along the way, along with the sales aspect of consistency, right? That whole thing about sales doesn't happen the first time you meet, is something that I probably knew in my earlier life, but I think in that situation, we learned that really well, right?
So what happens next?
So that was kind of a short stint in a way, right? So it was I mentioned 18 months. And I went from there to Colorado. So then I left that team essentially and went to Colorado and bought a small roofing company, still in the roofing business. And that business I turned into my most significant business in my career. So small business doing about $600,000 in revenue in the Front Range in Denver. And when I sold that business 7 years later, we did $47 million a year in revenue.
Damn.
So 600,000 to 47 million. That business, essentially, I did roll up a couple other businesses in it, but we,
for diversification or for revenue or
A little
EBITDA or all the above?
a little bit of both. So let's call it all the above, but we needed a kind of a window division, if you will.
Yeah.
And we bought a window, company out of Fort Collins. So we had a, essentially, we turned it into an exterior company, but essentially we were covering the Front Range. So we were the largest steep slope roofer in the Front Range at that time. We roofed 6,500 roofs a year. And we focused entirely on steep slope. We did maybe $5 million a year in revenue in low slope, but we were a Johns Manville contractor, but it was not a large portion of our business. We probably did it, and I got a little side story on, learning some mistakes in that kind of business. That's not necessarily business related, but roofing related.
Go ahead if you don't want to share.
Oh yeah. Well,
Because that's what everyone loves the storytelling on this, because then, you imagine if you're listening or watching, it's like, oh, Chad told his story. Mine's not as screwed up as his.
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
There you go.
Or there's hope. So go ahead.
Well, and I think along the way, we were building this pretty sizable, good steep slope roofing company and doing a great job of it. And I think somewhere along the way, I somehow decided that we should do more steep or low slope roofing. Low slope meaning commercial buildings, flat structures. And
and you describe it, would that be like foam, TPO, built up?
TPO or rubber. And we had a really good production team that was really good at shingles and tile and metal and things like that. But we didn't have a lot of people that really understood single ply and that kind of thing.
It's a different animal.
It's completely different. Yeah. And so I had a guy walk in the office one day, 60-year-old gentleman. He just said, "Hey, look, I've been on a roofing crew for 40 years. I need off the crews. I really know single ply like the back of my hand. And I would be highly interested in being involved in your production department, helping out with that." And I said, "Okay, sounds great." And at that time we were probably $35 million in revenue. So a sizable company, but we needed this extra person, and went through we had a pretty good process, forms you sign, like, haven't been injured, all these things. Right. And fast forward maybe 6 months, and this guy was moving a bucket of glue in the warehouse, 5-gallon bucket. So what does that weigh? 35 pounds. Tweaked his back, goes in, files a workers' compensation claim, $350,000 claim later. And this was in 2008, 2009. So today that claim is probably $1 million. I don't know, maybe not. I'm not a doctor, but let's assume it's a lot of money. And he had signed every form saying, "No, I've never been hurt." Turns out he had all kinds of pins in his back, he never should have been allowed anywhere near anything heavy. And, lied to us. Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
They paid the claim out. We got a 1.3 mod on already. I think at the time we were $300,000 a year in work comp insurance. So the insurance company gets it back.
Oh yeah,
right?
They do.
Yeah. And that was kind of a hard lesson. You run on fairly thin margins some days, and it was one of those things of like, man, how did this guy, lie to us straight to our, it didn't matter though, but he got taken care of, and we learned about hiring practices, maybe trying to vet a little bit better, from that.
But if you don't mind sharing, Chad, again, people always want to know, we get this all the time on the show, is what kind of percentage of margin could you run at in the roofing space?
I think when we had everything, and this changes in different levels of
I agree.
growth, right?
Just generalization.
Yeah, generalization. I think we were running probably 6 to 8%.
That's pretty tight.
In those days. I think I've got kind of a theory on, what I call business ceilings or wobble points in business, right? And I think between $10 and $15 million in revenue in the roofing space specifically is a pretty good spot to be in. Up to 10 is kind of hard. You break through 10, things get quite a bit easier until you get that $15 to $20 million space. At $15, $20 million, you have to really focus on letting other people make decisions. right?
Like Chris said earlier.
Yeah, you can't, the bottlenecks become increasingly worse. And I see this in a lot of clients in my coaching business that are struggling to break through $6, $8, $10 million, right? And, without fail, a lot of times those clients have, a CEO that's making most of the decisions,
Too many
decisions. Let's call it that. Right. So, so that point, I think EBITDA was probably better from 10 to 15, 17 million than it was 17 to 20. Because at that point, you're hiring other people that are causing more overhead. But then once you get past that 25, 30 million, the EBITDA turns around again, and gets a little bit better. But in construction type businesses, 2 or 3 points of EBITDA can be a lot of money, right? So, and a big difference in what somebody's willing to pay for you in the future. I sold that company to private equity.
That's what's going to be my next question, if you wouldn't mind sharing. How was there an earnout? Did you stay on? What was the transition?
Yeah. So here's a really hard lesson. So another story about this company. So I've grown 11 businesses in my career, sold 4 of those for over 7 figures, and 2 of those to private equity. And one of the harder lessons was that roofing company. So we essentially sold this business to a couple of private equity guys, and there was a large earnout involved with it. And we had a clause in the contract, essentially, like most contracts, that the reps and warranties clause was clearly defined, but an undefined end date on the reps and warranties clause. So today, I would never sign a contract that didn't have an end date defined in the reps and warranties clause, because they got in the business and decided they were in over their head and tried to find something to get out of the contract. Essentially 18 months later, through, the series of court proceedings, I ended up getting the business back, but they had kind of run it into the ground, unfortunately. And the $6.5 million earnout never got collected. So yeah, hard lesson. It was a hard few years of me beating myself up and said, why did I make the mistake of, accepting a contract that had something in it that today, every other deal I've done since, we've been successful in end dating or sunsetting the reps and warranties, which is fairly normal. And, and even myself buying a business, I don't have a problem with a seller sunsetting that, because I feel like as a good buyer, I can kind of know what's wrong, in a short amount of time, right? Or should be able to.
So how long? So if we don't need to spend a lot of time on that. Yeah. In that situation, what did it cost you? Another 2 years of your life to get it back? And then did you sell it again, or how did that chapter close then?
Yeah, I sold it off for pieces after that, because unfortunately the ongoing operator, they run off the sales manager and half the team left with him and that kind of thing, right? So went from, we had 35 salespeople, so we went from $47 million to revenue. I think when I got it back, it was like 6 or 7. So
ouch.
Mostly non-operational at that point. It was below the overhead line.
So there you are. If I can paraphrase, you're kind of beat up. What next?
Yeah. Well, I'd already moved on. So during that period of time, I had some other businesses as well. So I had a marketing company and had been involved in a software company as well. So I had some other things kind of going. If you don't mind me asking, Chad, marketing and software, to me, those are instrumental in what you were doing. Yeah. Were they harmonious, or were they standalones? I mean, or did you generate those as a necessary component or augmentation of what you were already doing? Yeah. So the answer to that, the marketing business, we had kind of figured some things out in the roofing business, right? And the sales manager at Clear Channel at the time came to me and said, "Hey, I think we got some kind of unique stuff here, and I've been thinking about going on my own. Would you be interested in partnering with me?" And so that's how that went.
Got it, which makes sense.
Yeah. And he ultimately took that business over and ran it, and to this day still runs that business and is doing well with it. Yeah,
that's cool.
But yeah, we figured some things out. I think, from a marketing perspective, I love sales and marketing. I'm a sales and marketing guy, right? And same thing with the pool business, which I'm sure we'll get to. Sales and marketing is the key, in my opinion, to lots of things in business. So the old adage, sales fixes everything. I don't know if it really fixes it, but it hides a lot of things, let's say.
Provides the cash flow to do a lot, right?
Exactly. It provides the cash flow to continue to make the other mistakes, maybe. But
maybe that's our famous quote for the day.
Yeah, there you go. But it is important, and a lot of people lose sight of that, right? Because one of the quick things to do is let's slash the marketing budget, right?
Right.
That seems expensive. We're spending X thousands of dollars on these lead generation things. We should eliminate that, right? And it's the easy low hanging fruit when a lot of times that's like stop drinking when you're in Death Valley, right? You probably shouldn't do that. You should continue to drink, but hike out.
For the sake of time, then and I don't care how this interweaves, Chad. Well, I got a funny feeling the pool spot will end up dovetailing into what we're talking about. So how did you meet Michael, and how did Next Level Growth collaboration start?
Yeah, for sure.
If that ties into the pool thing, then just the whole story.
Yeah, for sure. So I have been coaching et cetera for years, right? So I'm involved in EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, if you're familiar. And, I've been providing, coaching, mentoring, whatever for years. And along the way, just never charged for it, just really kind of experience-based coaching, no system, if you will. And
can I ask, was it that you generally tried to pay it forward, or did you just felt you were a better version of yourself in that environment?
Or
all the above, or because let's be honest, I think, and if I don't want this to be too blunt, most people that I meet that do that, there's a sense of ego, not in a bad way, but in a good way of it feeds your ego to drive the entrepreneurial spirit sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I think for sure there's probably a little bit of that, but honestly, I get more out of that than the person I'm coaching probably. But
thank you.
But I will say that the aspect of helping somebody and being that kind of guide is a very fulfilling thing to me. And I don't know, I don't want to say that's an ego stroke necessarily, as it's just I use the adage of the boxer, right? So the bell rings, the boxer comes back to the corner, and the trainer wipes his eyebrow, and says, hey, the guy's dragging his left toe before he throws the right hook. The boxer doesn't see it because all he's trying to do is not get killed out there, right? And so he goes back into the ring and he looks for it. Now he sees it and he ducks and he throws the left hook and knocks the guy out. So it's, as a coach, this fulfillment is kind of helping the person see the things they're missing, maybe the things on the edge, the peripheral, if you will. And I think I was doing that before I met Michael. I was doing that for free, helping people out. I really like being involved in startups, right? Or start figuring the market out, or transitioning, getting ready to sell the business, that kind of thing. Clipping along, not everything's hunky dory. I'm putting 15% to the 20% to the bottom line, whatever it is. It isn't always a super good fit for me, actually, right? I actually I like helping break through those ceilings that I'm talked about. But sorry, I think I got kind of off track there.
It's your hour. The track is your track, Chad.
Yeah. So basically, I was in the pool business, and I had sold the business to private equity, to national.
So this was your sex. This was that.
That was the other private equity. So National Pool.
A little bit more guarded this time, Chad.
Maybe. Yeah. Made sure that it was good for all of us. And at that point, I was like, hey, what am I going to do with the rest of, my next period, my next section of time, let's call it. And I was CEO coaching at the time, kind of on my own, and I was starting to charge for it, but I needed some structure and a system, right? And so I started doing some research and found, Pinnacle Guide and the guys there, and they introduced me to Michael. Right?
So that was the connection.
That was the connection. Yeah. I had met Michael before in EO, but got to that point where it was sit down with Next Level Growth and see if this could be a fit.
Let's take kind of a sideways tangent just a little bit. I don't want to relive the whole pool thing, but since much of this audience is specialty contractors and things of that nature, because we still have a strong construction affinity, if you will, on this podcast.
Yep.
What are the lessons that you could share specific to that kind of specialty area, whether it's talking about the valuation or the processes or anything that dovetails into what you guys are trying to do at Next Level Growth? Because I think there's so many of those small cap, mid cap companies, mom and pops, call it what you want. They don't know what they don't know. They're usually wonderful tradespeople, maybe some savviness in business, but usually that's where that stops, right?
Yeah.
Is when they find a guy or person like you, Chad, that can be relatable both from a construction background, but then the coaching side. Spend a few minutes just talking about how do you distill that down into kind of a mentoring message on this podcast, just for that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I felt like where you were going was like transition there, but I think we came back to like getting a bit of more of a return on life and building a company that you can kind of operate. And, so a couple of things I think are important to building a company that you can operate without killing yourself and working yourself to the bone, right? So many people work 65 hours a week or more and almost wear it like a badge of honor, as opposed to the realization that, you're doing things that maybe other people should be doing in your company, right? Good key delegation is really, really hard for entrepreneurs because a lot of times it's easier to do it yourself, right? It takes more time to train somebody and to train them correctly and well than to do it myself, because the last time I did that.
There comes a time when dreams become a reality, when you see your vision materialize into a true work of art. And the only way to get there is to choose a general contractor who shares that same vision and knows how to bring it to life. At Bleu, we aren't so big that we've forgotten where we've come from, and we aren't so small that we can't care for your projects regardless of their size. When your vision deserves safety, perfection, timeliness, and expertise in order to become a reality, trust Bleu to get it done right the first time.
That person went to a job site and, screwed up a job or told a customer something that they shouldn't have and created a bad name for me. One of the ways that you can tell, in my opinion, if an entrepreneur is struggling with good delegation or setting good systems in place, if they have a small number of reviews that are all high stars, because it's really easy to keep 5-star reviews for a small number if you keep such tight control of your business that you're not letting anybody make any mistakes.
Interesting.
But you can never grow past. If you get to a point where you're exponentially growing a business, you have to be okay with other people being in charge and making those mistakes. You have to have systems in place that allow for the checks and balances and allow us to circle back and learn from the mistakes. But you have to be able to build leaders in your business that can learn from that and make and kind of fail forward, if you will. I tell clients all the time, and just people talking, that one of the things to remember is that good leaders build good leaders. So it's not good leaders are good leaders. Good leaders make good leaders, because the leadership team is only as good as the leader allows them or teaches them or leads them to be. And if there's not good leaders on your leadership team, no matter if there's 2 people on the team or 10, the business will never succeed past the point of that lowest common denominator on the team. So good leaders make good leaders is really a change. It's a slight shift, but it's a change in mindset on how businesses can grow successfully. And the difference between a business that has lots of good reviews where people are willing to talk about it, but maybe 1 or 2 that didn't go right, but they fixed it, versus a business that has just a few, but they're all good. In the pool business, we used to tell people, they were like, oh yeah, but you're $200 more or $500 more, whatever, than the next guy. And I would train my salespeople. I'd say, well, let's just pull up their reviews really quick. Oh wow, they've got 30 reviews. Oh wow. Well, we have 600 reviews and there's 4.8 stars. It's really hard to keep that amount of consistency with that many reviews. It's really difficult. 30 reviews, no problem, right? Nobody expects you in the business to make a mistake. They expect good quality workmanship. I talk to a lot of contractors that say, like, what's your core value? And like, oh, we're good people and we do good work. I'm like, that's not a core value. That's made bed. When you go to the hotel and you check into the hotel, you expect the bed to be made, right? You should be a good person. You should do a good work. If you're a home builder, you should build a good house. that's not a core value, right? And so there can be some disconnection from that. And I think just to bring that back into the guide, the coaching space, it's my kind of responsibility or job to try to kind of help people, kind of point them in the direction of building some of those things that allow them then to grow that company past those points. It's really hard to grow businesses past certain points if you don't have those things in place.
Good. You said something that intrigued me, and I want to kind of be the devil's advocate and think like maybe an audience member. It's like, well, geez, Chad, that's great. You know, we want to fail forward and we want to make micro mistakes. How do I avoid the macro mistake? Like, where's the balance? How in your coaching space, whether it's you or next level growth, how do you train leaders to embrace the fail forward and not be have the stigmatism of the macro failure?
Yeah.
Because it's a balancing act, right?
100%. And the thing with leadership teams is when you put people in place, you have to let them do certain things, but that doesn't mean you give them carte blanche.
Right.
You know, so
there's belts and suspenders is what you're saying.
Yeah. There's systems, there's trust, but verify, right? So, you know, one of the things that I'm a huge proponent of, and lots of people are as well, is that kind of weekly tactical meeting, right? Okay. So the weekly tactical meeting is at a specific, spot in the week. It's every week. It's the same time. But one of the things that the advantage to that weekly tactical meeting is it's the stake in the ground, right? So you don't have this, semantics of sales always screws up the orders, or production never gets our jobs done on time, or sales never gives me the right color of paint, or the drip edge, or the, the concrete texture, or whatever, right? If you set up these meetings correctly and you build the systems in there, we're only talking about Tuesday to Tuesday. We're not going back to last month or the month before. We're talking about this Tuesday to next Tuesday, or this Tuesday to last Tuesday. And if there's a mistake, we go over the jobs that we had the mistakes on and we learn from them in that time period. But we get rid of these semantics of sales always screws up the orders, production never gets anything done on time, or whatever. And when you kind of get in that system and establish that consistent flow of that established meeting, some of those things go away. The big mistakes, the macro mistakes you're talking about, happen in very small amounts, right? And versus if all of a sudden we went 6 weeks and nobody has said anything, and now we make a macro mistake, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's one way.
Yeah. I don't know where my brain was going next for my next question. I was trying to think about what you were describing versus the way when Chris was on, the way he was talking about it. Maybe I'll just pose it this way. How do you feel, or how do you coach, Chad, on the people versus the process thing? Because we've already beat the EOS, plus to death as far as what that looks like. So we don't need to spend a lot. But I am curious because the unique perception that you have, or through Chad's lens, how do you look at, because you play more as much more in the construction space or some of these smaller cap businesses, how do you coach through that on the people side? Like, I guess I'm looking kind of for the uniqueness of Chad's coaching style within Next Level Growth on that people side. Could you go down that path a little bit?
Yep. And I think some of these things we have a lot of structure around, so there's an advantage to working with somebody that has kind of that structure behind. Like, we have a lot of tools that we bring into place, right? If somebody's having a specific people issue or whatever, we have tools for that kind of thing, right? To help solve that. But to answer your question, people versus process, without the right people or good people, it doesn't matter what the process is. There's no way a perfect process you can put a crappy person in place and enact it. A players, B players, or C players. C players don't enact good process, right? You have to have good people to enact the process. The other thing about teams in general is A players don't want to work with C players.
No.
So what happens is we ruin A players by putting up with the C player that's on the team, with the cousin or the nephew or whatever that we hired that we never should have.
So we're bringing nepotism into the conversation in contracting. No, really?
Shocker, right? But the reality of it is that is really important. It's hire good people, but don't have good people working with bad people. The A players don't want to work with C players. So the focus, in my opinion, is good people in place that are A players or A potential,
Mm-hmm.
and the people that are B players that can be coached into A potential, maybe, but no C players on the team. You're not doing anybody any favors.
Right.
You're not doing the C player any favor. That person might just be working for your company because they almost feel obligated because you hired them, right? They're not happy. Nobody in the team's happy with them. And, it's some people are just not always in the right spot in life,
So on that then, if you can't, you don't use names or anything, but in recent coaching moments, can you give any stories or testimonies to that where you've helped a company transition out of that?
Yeah. I mean, again, as a coach, I'm going to give guidance.
Okay.
But it's really hard. People ask me all the time, just tell me what to do.
No,
right?
It doesn't work.
It doesn't really work that way. I'll give you some guidance, but you have some of these decisions still have to come from you, right? So we're going to give guidance and direction. And there might be times here and there where I might pull a client aside and just say, hey, look, do you see this? This is a blinking light, right? Like, in pilot speak, when the warning light goes off, we have to deal with it, right? Like, what are we going to do to deal with it? So sometimes I might point out the warning light, right? But it's not the coaches or the guide's place to tell you exactly what to do. I have a client that came to me from another guide that was very frustrated because their previous coach was saying, you need to fire this sales manager. And they didn't believe they did. And so we spent a lot of time kind of working through the process, and I agreed with them that they just had the person in kind of the wrong situation. And today that person is really killing it. But
did you change seats on the bus?
We actually didn't change seats on the bus. We changed a few things about the team.
Can you, again, I think this is one of those, if it's not edgy, it's not engaging. So again, without sacrificing any proprietary information here, to get into that a little bit, like how, because I guarantee if people are going, Chad, tell me more.
Yeah. So in this particular situation, fairly larger company, $80 million in revenue. And the sales and production team was kind of merged. So they were using sales/production project managers to kind of run the projects. So typically what happens in those situations, especially in larger businesses that can afford to separate that task, is you have salespeople doing the role of production that really hate it. And you have production people that are detailed, analytical, and good at following up on things that really aren't that good at sales.
No.
So now we have people there's a section of people in this team that are unhappy. There might be a third of the team that actually has a crossover in there, but we're not successfully doing things the way we should. And this applied to the situation. We had the sales manager that was in this role that was managing people that were in production or project management roles, which wasn't his strong suit. And cleaning that up and making it more sales focused, like, let's just focus on sales. A large company like that, we need to delineate and focus sales on sales. And although it's somewhat early in the process, I think it's been very successful. And I think 25 is going to be a massive year for them because of it. So kind of that was probably the getting into the weeds of it, I guess, the nuts and bolts without really getting into the details, but separating those processes out and allowing the sales manager, because he was probably headed out the door, quite honestly. And it's a big salary. This is not a small company. That was going to be a massive shift for that person.
So did the let's say the C-suite or the ownership that you were consulting with on this one, I assume, based on kind of, if I'm picking up the cues that you're putting on the table here, they just followed your guidance. You didn't actually tell them to do the tangible things. You were just kind of guiding, or here's a warning line. I am curious though, Chad, I realize this hasn't come to, it sounds like it's still in process and hasn't come to its fullest potential as far as fruition goes. What did it do culturally for those two divisions though?
Well, I think it's massive. It's been a massive shift. Now I'm next week going to do their annual. So we'll see.
We'll find out.
Ask me in 2 weeks. But
what's your assumptions?
My assumption from what I see at this point is that we have people on the sales team that are in a much happier situation. So that's number one. And we had a CEO that was really wanting to keep this individual, but was trying to keep him in the wrong situation. So now we were able to kind of tweak and adjust and put that individual in the right situation. And I think everybody's happier. So that's my sense. Now, I don't sit in their meetings every day, so I don't know that 100%, but, they went from a year that was definitely going to underperform to just barely missing the number. So I think it's already started to turn in that direction. And, I think 25 they're going to go past their budget on it. And really that's a result of, making a tweak in direction, not necessarily the person, if you will.
What, and maybe I'm stereotyping here, but it seems like you have a real connection with like you said, the small business and the startups and maybe, smaller acquisitions and M&A type stuff. What are you seeing? Like, what are the trends that are coming through to you specifically as Chad under the guise of next level growth that either intrigue you or could be potential, like I'll give you an example. Chris was talking about how in some of his stuff, they're combating AI, both good and bad. And I kind of posing the question to you, maybe through a different light of what maybe in that small business, so we have so many small business people that watch and listen to this, is what are those obstacles that you see through your lens that are coming up?
Yeah, that's a hard question, right? On the thing of AI, I think that companies in general, businesses in general that aren't using AI to some degree now are already too late, right? So,
agreed.
So we need to just, even if it's the basic stuff, don't write your own emails anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
let's basic stuff. Yeah.
Let's do the basic stuff at the very least. The full automation stuff is not, maybe as necessary in construction type businesses, but there's lots of advantages and opportunities. But I think I always think about things from a lens of what are we going to do next with this business, right? So for me, having sold multiple businesses and done acquisitions along the way, I think of everything from a perspective of what does the future section of time look like for this business? Are we going to sell it? Are we building it to sell? Are we building it to just remove ourselves from? What does that look like? And I think there's a few trades businesses right now that the opportunities are adjusting, right? So for instance, a few years ago, private equity was all about heating and air companies, HVAC. HVAC's time might have passed is a hard lesson, I think, for some HVAC companies that maybe didn't sell. But there's been a lot of roll up in that space. And the private equity guys that I know are refocusing on even to a little bit more, like the refocus is on, blue collar business that are maybe one step below that now, because there's a very good core of service companies that are very economically elastic. Like look at plumbers, for instance. What happens if your toilet clogs and it's an issue? You're not going to live with that.
No.
So there's distinct businesses that have opportunities in all economies, right? And I think private equity looks for opportunities in those things. Now, if you're not selling to private equity, take that off the table to some degree.
Right.
But if you want the bigger multiples, you're probably not going to get that from, the guy that just wants to leave his corporate job and get into business, right? So the opportunities of the bigger multiples come from those situations. And so I'm seeing some of that kind of play out in opportunities from transitions perspective as that goes. From an economical opportunity now that we have kind of a transition in politics in the United States, I think we're going to see a little bit more money cut loose when it comes to, what people are doing with their homes. I don't know. I'm not into real estate. I don't really understand real estate all that much, but I assume that we're going to have some newer opportunities when it comes to construction and some of those things. But I don't know. If I had more of a crystal ball, I'd probably.
No, I wasn't looking for the crystal ball. I was just looking for your inflection. And I think you answered a lot of it because we've, you can imagine on this show, we've had, you're right. Well, look at your past. Roofing and HVAC and, the typical trades where PE was just gobbling everything up.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing, I agree with you to a certain degree. I would call it a revolting, but I am seeing like those sub-markets. I'm not going to go into great detail on my comments right now, but I think of some of the spinoffs of plumbing where now they're the hot button because back to the home services space. I mean, we've had Tommy Mello on here, and if you follow anything like what he does with A1 and the home server or the Freedom Network that they're doing, you just see how it's just organically growing across the country of there's all these other tiers now where people are going, wow, I can monetize this. And I don't have to sell to PE. Maybe I just have a VC or family office that might inject me with some capital, and we can just go more like on this growth versus this growth.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was kind of asking you, because again, you have a connection now with the construction related things and with those small and mid cap companies where there's a lot of I call them constituents or followers on this, where they're going, oh, all we ever hear is this, where Chad now just talked about there are other opportunities. And I want them to be, I want them to have faith and kind of some freedom to know that there are changes. Change is inevitable, right? You just have to keep your eyes a little bit more open on the periphery to see what's open.
Well, and I think if you're a business owner, someone like Tommy Mello, you mentioned his name, but if you're a business owner that has a business, the opportunities are the things that connect to it. So if you're trying to expand and do other things, you can become the best garage door person in Phoenix. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's other things that connect and scratch your own itch to some degree that connect with that. And I think the construction industry sometimes ignores that or misses that, right? So what are the things that are adjacent? If you're looking to expand your, entrepreneurial, business, I have entrepreneurs that, have one business and then go buy a restaurant. I'm like, wait a minute. Like that is completely different than the home building company you have. Like what is the thing that scratches your own itch? And maybe there's opportunities along that, the magical, I'm starting a software company, maybe a little bit too far. It might be too many degrees of separation, right? But that happens a lot. And I have friends that did it successfully, but
do you regret it?
No, I think, my situation in that was short-lived and fine. But I think what my view is now at my age is things that are a little closer to your sphere of influence actually are a little bit more beneficial. Because if the customer interacts in some way or the list is similar, the ability to cross, we were, the second largest pool service company in the Phoenix Valley. So we just did pool service. We did repair and remodeling of our customers. We didn't build any pools, but we just focused on pool service. Now, there was other things along the way that we added that fit. We did pool water filtration as well. Unique kind of niche-y business, but scratched your own itch. And we had a busy trailer all the time. Right. So there's opportunities in that. If you have a electrical contractor or a plumbing contractor or, a landscape company or whatever, I encourage people to look on the edge of that. What is over here that you might be paying somebody else to do, or you're, or using a service that, could be an opportunity. I think that's maybe a missed opportunity.
No, I think you framed that really well. We've tried to share that again on other shows as well as a good example. Even breaking it down to a simple thing, like you said, is you didn't do any new construction. So you look at your AP and your AR and AP cycle on that versus your service. You guys were your cash flow was awesome. You were getting paid.
You get paid every month.
You're getting paid really fast. And your vendors, you probably were able to pay them pretty fast. And hence, then you got buy down and then you got preferential treatment. And you're incentivizing a creative structure to keep going. And then, like I said, if you bolt something on that's complementary, well then, like I'm just making stuff up. We do sunshades now. Now, maybe that was a bad example, but hey, as long as we're in your back patio cleaning, we could throw something in your, your umbrella holder and call it good, or I'm just making crap up.
Yeah, and 100%. I mean, like a home cleaning company that does window washing, right?
You're there.
You're there already. You have the client list. They're getting their windows washed anyways, right? So having a separate opportunity for that is something like that.
I just looked in the short time we have left. I would be doing a disservice if I didn't ask, in these last few minutes, Chad, what would you like to share with the audience specifically about, whether it's your coaching style, or how you're proud of what Next Level Growth is doing and how people can reach out to your organization?
Yeah. I mean, quite honestly, I love conversations like this. So I love talking about business. I'll have coffee with anybody that wants to, pick my brain. Maybe I should rephrase it. It might not be enough in there worth picking, but,
he's an old salty roofer.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm not a big, it's really hard for me, honestly, to sell myself. It's hard. It feels so, I don't know. I've sold a lot of things in my life when it comes to coaching. I struggle with that. But so long story short, I mean, my kind of thing, as I had this belief on return on life, right? Like you shouldn't work yourself to the bone to, miss all the kids' soccer games and, get to the end and wish you hadn't. Nobody wishes they hadn't spent more time. So I think part of my kind of role in life is helping people get to a point where, maybe they can get some of those freedoms they want. But maybe that's more money for one person, or it's more time for another, or it's, the opportunity to, always go camping for a month in the summer, with their family, whatever. Whatever that currency is for you, I try and help people find that, right? So that's kind of my thing. My coaching style when it comes to, helping people in business is really just let's dig in and let's figure it out, right? I follow the frameworks. We have good good tools and all those things to help people out, and follow the frameworks to get to those next levels, if you will.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. But in all reality, it's I'm going to dig in your business and really help you kind of get out of the weeds of it and build the structures and stuff.
You still flying, I assume?
I am. Yeah, I flew home. I was at a retreat in Joshua Tree yesterday, so I just flew I have a Cirrus.
Nice.
I flew my Cirrus back yesterday. So yeah.
Is there anybody else in the family that's now into it?
No, unfortunately, it's just me. My son, likes to go with me, but he's headed to pharmacy school, so he's not.
Oh, he got smart.
Exactly. I'm like, whatever you do.
There's no shortage of drugs in this nation, so
exactly.
I think his job security is good.
I think he'll probably be fine with that. So yeah, so that's good.
Well, Chad, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I know, again, it was the audiences or people have been asking me is keep going down this business coaching thing because people. Let's be honest, since 2020, a lot of people have just been in no man's land.
Yeah.
They're proud of who they are. A lot of times they're proud of their family business. A lot of times, like you said, they might not understand that there's a peer group that they can talk to, and it doesn't have to be as formal as EO or Vistage or YPO or, any of those.
Yeah.
There's, I remember there's guests on here that have said, listen, I'm part of my church group and I go have coffee with the guys or the girls on a Wednesday morning and just barfing on them is enough.
Yeah.
And I think, again, where I'm going with this is whether it's Michael, whether it's Chris, whether it's you being on here, and we've had other guests in your vertical where just telling there's a lot of people to reach out in what I call America's smallest big town, which is Phoenix.
Yeah.
To where, like you said, most people will take a phone call. That doesn't mean there's a transaction, but they might put you in the right direction. So again, thank you, Michael, for having another one of your partners on here. And we're just really trying to pay it forward so that people can reach out. So
I appreciate it. Happy to help out anybody. All
right. Thanks. Thanks again. And Chad Nikkel at Next Level Growth, if anyone wants to reach out to them.
You've been listening to the Mac and Blue Show, brought to you by Blue Wave General Contracting. Be sure to subscribe to the Mac and Blue podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Follow JJ Levinsky on LinkedIn and Instagram. Tune in every Monday